Hello and welcome back to Fair Trade, a Faith Unfiltered podcast series where courageous people share the candid stories of their faith journey and what brought them to Community of Christ. I'm your host, Blake Smith, and we're going to pick up with part 2 of an episode in an interview with myself and Jennifer Toone. We hope that you enjoy.
This whole God is a vending machine of blessings for the righteous, this is not reality. And I started to encounter more people living kind of on these edges where Mormon doctrine and dogma was turning out not to be so true. And I was hearing their stories and friends who lived in deeper poverty for way longer than we did. And friends who experienced way worse tragedies than we had, and kind of their reckoning with what that meant in terms of LDS theology. And so I was kind of redefining my whole idea of what God was. And I was also trying to parent all these little children and coming to the understanding that they want to be good. They want to be good. And when they aren't, it's not because they're bad kids. It's because they lack some skill or they lack some understanding, or it's not developmentally appropriate to expect them to sit still for 3 hours in church or whatever. Right. And as I was coming into my parenting, I was taking a lens approach to God that I was this kind of the same approach to God as I was taking to my children. And my line of reasoning and logic went, I, as a totally imperfect mortal human being, I would never inflict deliberate suffering on my children so that they could learn a lesson or so that they could become closer to me. I would never do that. And if I, an imperfect person, mortal human being, would never, ever do that to my children, then why on earth would a supposedly perfect, all-knowing God? That doesn't make any sense. And why would God punish people for making mistakes, for not being totally perfect all the time, for not having the right understanding? Why would God punish people for that? We're all just human, just trying to figure it out. That doesn't make sense. And so my personal theology was kind of coming in direct conflict with the church. And for a while, we have a 5.5-year gap between my 4th and my actual 5th. And during this period, I was volunteering at my kids' elementary school. And one year, the principal, I was teaching music to just my own kids' classrooms, just for fun, because I wanted to, for me. And I loved doing it, and it was so much fun. And the principal and the PTO both approached me one year and were like, so we know you've been doing this with your own kids' classrooms, and we just managed to do way better with this fundraiser for the arts that we have every year than we've ever done before, like $30,000 excess. They've gotten a huge boom on this fundraiser. And they're like, would you be interested in teaching music to the whole school? And I was like, yes. Sign me up. And so I started working. And this was like 2016. And the whole 2016 presidential election was happening. And we had always, we were registered Republicans because we had always been told you can't be a good Mormon and be a Democrat. But we had been kind of drifting further and further, both of us, honestly, had been drifting further and further to the left. My husband's experience, going to school as an environmental scientist, comes in direct conflict with a lot of conservative ideas about climate. And, he would share things he learned with me. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so we had been kind of gradually shifting that direction anyway. And so we were starting to really come into conflict with the people in our faith community. And working as a teacher, I was talking a lot with teachers, and teachers have a reputation for being pretty liberal for good reason. So I was at the same time, I had all these cracks and fissures in my faith. I was also kind of deconstructing my idea of the U.S. and U.S. politics and my beliefs and the things I'd been told about race and about poverty and about all these other things. And so we were both really deconstructing all that stuff and really coming out very far on the other side where everybody we went to church was. And so we were both starting to kind of really struggle with this doesn't mesh with the loving Jesus we've been taught about, right? These ideas that, Black people are inherently more worthy of poverty, or it's their own fault because they haven't accepted the right Jesus or whatever. Or the idea that, the law enforcement is always correct. They must have done something to deserve getting shot. And other all kinds of things, the treatment of immigrants and all these things, just all of it was like blowing wide open for us. We were learning things we'd never learned in school about the United States. And we had been taught growing up, God made the nation the way he did, and this is a godly nation, and God had his hand in the Constitution. And we were looking at all of it and going, are you sure? Because I'm not sure about that anymore. And we were learning more about the founding fathers and about what they actually thought about God and government and all those things. And we're like, we were lied to all the way around. Our school teachers lied to us. Our church people have been lying to us. Everything we've ever built our lives on has been a lie or a twisting of the truth. And so we did finally have our fifth child, and we were getting made way too big for our little house. And he was born in 2018. And so we bought a new house closer to where Jeff worked so that he didn't have an hour-long commute. It's now like 25-minute commute. And when we moved in 2019, the ward that we moved into, both Jeff and I were really kind of having a hard time with the church, with church attitudes. I had been introduced to feminism. So I was really starting to be like, this isn't okay. Like the way they're treating women isn't okay. The fact that I can't just nurse my baby in sacrament meeting, I have to be shunned to some outside room and wear a cover when the kid doesn't like it. And so when we moved, we were like, okay, it's a whole new ward. Maybe it's going to be new people. Maybe it will be better. Maybe it won't be so hard. Maybe we'll finally find like some friends, because we would have a friend here or there, but mostly we just weren't ever really integrated into the LDS community. And we found it was the opposite here. It was the worst place we've ever been. And we were like, we bought this house. Jeff's going to be in his career for like 30 plus more years. We're not planning on moving again, and we're going to be stuck with these people for 30 years. What are we going to do? And then the pandemic happened and everything shut down. And our sixth child was born the week the world shut down. And we had already felt really isolated because we were not wanted in this new ward. And the elementary schools down here in Elk Grove are huge. We're talking like 1,400 students. And so getting to know parents was really difficult. And then I was pregnant, and so the world shut down. And we were like, it gave us a minute to breathe. We weren't constantly running from church activity to church activity. We weren't going to church every week and sitting there for 2 and 3 hours. We weren't like fighting with our kids over coming to church, because by this point, my oldest was like 12. And it was really becoming, I don't want to go to church. I want nothing to do with church. And we're like, but what are we supposed to do about that? like you have to come because we go as a family. And that was the only answer we knew. And when things kind of started opening back up in the summer, like we looked at each other and we're like, what are we going to do? I don't really want to go back, but our families will not be happy. What are we going to do? And because we'd moved away from the school community where my kids were and where I had been teaching, and we didn't have any friends. And the only support system we had here in Elk Grove was my parents, because they had moved up here a couple of years after we did. And back like 2013, 2014. And so they were the only support we had. And I was like, we have 6 kids. And 2 of them are very small, and our oldest is having a lot of struggles, and our third is having a lot of struggles. And we're just like, we are in a really, really, really tough spot. And I cannot do this by myself. But I don't have any friends. I don't have any community. I have nobody to lean on, no support except my parents. And if we leave the church, my parents will never talk to me again. I don't want to deal with the things my mom will say. And I don't want to have to deal with the possibility that I might have to like limit seeing them or cut them out altogether, because I had no idea what they would do. And so I was like, no, we're going to have to just suck it up and stick it out. There's no other option. And Jeff went the other way. I was like, wait, excuse me, what? What makes you think you're allowed to do that? Oh man, I was so mad and so angry with him because I was like, listen, these are decisions we make together. We have to make them together. And he was like, but I can't make myself believe what I don't believe anymore. And I had been kind of holding it together and trying to force myself to hold all these things together and try and make it work all these years. And every time I had kind of brought up any doubts or questions or frustrations to Jeff, he would just, it's fine. It's fine. The church is true. It's fine. And so I had been desperately like holding all the pieces together, trying to stay. And then he decided he didn't want to anymore. And I was like, wait. Why do you get to decide that you don't believe it anymore overnight and just go, while I have been deciding over the course of the last 10-ish years that I don't really believe this anymore, and I wasn't allowed to just go. So I was really angry for a while, and we decided to start seeing a therapist because we were like, we cannot navigate a mixed faith marriage very well. And it's crazy to me that there's even a concept of a mixed faith marriage. Like, all marriages are kind of mixed faith. Nobody really believes the same things, but we have been conditioned to think that, of course, we believed all the same things because you have to believe the same things. And as we talked and as we saw a therapist, it came out that we had never really sat really in the same spaces and believed the church stuff in the same ways before. Like, there were a lot of places where we had been in conflict and didn't know because we were told that we couldn't possibly be in conflict because everybody believes this the same way. And, as we learned to negotiate, like, what kinds of things we were going to do and what we weren't going to do. And as the schools here in California opened up a lot later than everywhere else in the country. They didn't open up until April of 2021. So almost like a little over a year into the pandemic. And as the kids were going back to school, 3 of our children came out to us, or all 3 of our oldest children came out to us in various ways. And so at that point I was like, listen, I know more than enough to know that the LDS church is not a safe place for LGBTQ children. It is not. You are under no obligation to come. And we have been having all kinds of philosophical and religious beliefs differences with the people that we went to church with. But Jeff was still kind of like, he was still coming to church and he was still pretending for my sake, because I was like, I do not want these people who are so mean to then start making comments about, oh, your husband left the church. And I also didn't want my parents' input. And so nobody knew that he was now a non-believer and that I was staying in, but not really because I wanted to. And we were kind of having to do that journey by ourselves because we didn't dare tell anybody. Being in a mixed faith marriage is really, really shameful. And I had heard my mom say multiple times, if your spouse leaves the church, you leave your spouse. And I was like, I am not leaving this man. Are you out of your mind? No. I was like, I like him. I kind of like him kind of a lot. And I was like, we're going to figure out how to do this. We're going to go to therapy and we are going to figure out how to do this because we love each other way too much. And we have been through hell together. Like, we are not walking away. We're not. And he felt the same. And so we were trying to negotiate how we start leaving children at home without people asking too many questions. And we, at this point, I think it was like summer of 2022, we had been kind of negotiating it okay. And just like, if a kid felt like coming, they came. And if they didn't feel like coming, they didn't come. And people were starting to ask us about our kids. And we're like, well, we're not going to force them. So there was a lot of whispering happening behind our backs. And in summer of 2022, like, I had posted something on my social media about how 4th of July at church always made me uncomfortable. It always made me uncomfortable. And so I posted on my stories about how 4th of July at church was hard for me. And I didn't like it. And it didn't jive with me that it was so Christian nationalist when I didn't believe that that's what God or Jesus really wanted. And somebody in our ward took a screenshot of my story and shared it all over the ward. And she was angry with me over something. She was the organist and it was my job to like pick the hymns for Sundays. And I didn't really choose any of the patriotic hymns because it made me feel a little queasy. And she didn't like that. So she just changed them one day, like last minute. And I was like, hey, if there are hymns you want to do, let me know. Like, I can work them into the schedule, but please don't change things last minute because I plan things, 6 months in advance. And I don't want to have to like go rework my plan because you chose something that I chose for 3 weeks from now. So please, can you just let me know in advance? And I'm willing to work with you, whatever you want to play. And she made it very clear that the whole ward knew how unpatriotic I was and what awful things I was. And I was a heretic. And then she blocked me so that I couldn't respond. And I was like, whoa. And I was so shaken that I was like, we're going somewhere else. We're going somewhere else this coming Sunday. We are not going to the LDS church. We are going somewhere else. And Jeff and I had kind of talked about various other faith communities that maybe felt like they could be good. And he had been listening to a lot of the Community of Christ podcasts. And he was like, I feel like they really, they made some hard choices and they did things that the LDS version, the Brighamites, should have done, but we're too worried about offending the little old grandmas in some rural area of Utah. And they didn't make those hard decisions. They didn't ordain women. They fought against ordaining Black people. They still have no place in their church for LGBTQ people. And so we had talked a lot about how Community of Christ had done all those things that we wished the LDS church would do. And so when, this incident with this lady happened, Jeff was like, well, you want to just go check out Community of Christ? And I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's go see. And we showed up at the Sacramento congregation and I will never forget, huge pride flag in the fellowship hall as you walk in. It's the first thing you see is this giant pride flag. And I just felt so safe. I felt so safe. And we introduced ourselves to people. We came in, we sat through the service. And at the end, the Pastor Scott, came up to us and was talking to us, and we were explaining about our LGBTQ kids, and we were explaining all these things. And at the time we had a child who thought maybe they were trans. They were kind of exploring their gender identity. And so we were kind of explaining that to Pastor Scott, and he was just immediately lovely, immediately accepting, immediately went straight to they, them pronouns and the name that particular child preferred, and just lovely. And I am pretty sure Pastor Kim was ordained that week or a couple weeks later. It was they're ordaining a woman as pastor. This is amazing. And Pastor Scott is a gay man married to his husband. And I was like, this is incredible. We have a married gay man pastor and a woman pastor. How could you be any more different from where we just came from? And it was just such a lovely, we walked in and we felt home and we felt community and we felt immediately arms wide open welcoming us. And we have never felt anything that even compares to that in the LDS church. And we have never not felt that every time we go to Community of Christ. We've never not felt totally warm and accepted and loved every single time. And it was such a stark contrast. And I started to feel that there was maybe a place that was safe enough that if I left the Mormon church, it wouldn't matter what my parents did. There would be people who could hold us and help take care of us and be there for us, even if we completely lost both of our families. And so I was sold. Sign me up. But it still took us a little while, six-ish months, before we made a clean break with the LDS church. But we started going to Community of Christ every other week. We traded off. And our kids would come to Community of Christ and they would not go to the LDS church. We're like, good, we don't want you to go to the LDS church. That's not a place we want you to be. But I was the choir director and I was still trying, I liked directing choir, and I didn't have a school I could go work for as a music teacher because I don't have a degree in music. Well, I didn't at the time. I do now, but I didn't then. And so the music teaching job I had at my kids' elementary school had really been pure luck. Right? How often do you find a public school that has that kind of money? And so I was like, well, I want to keep teaching music, but that means I need to go get a music degree. So I signed up for classes at our local community college to start going to do music. And I kept doing music at the LDS church because at the time I felt like this is my only place to kind of do this. And as I was doing school, and I was going to school with a bunch of 18-year-olds, children not much older than my own children, but they didn't seem to care that I was in my early 40s and they liked me. And I was like, wait, what? People like me for who I am, weirdy quirks and everything, like awkward moments and everything. What? It was such a different experience than anything I'd had ever in my life. So for the first semester and then a little into the next semester, I was drifting further and further and further from wanting to have anything to do with the LDS church ever again. And when I was going to school, I was super careful. I did not want anybody to know I was Mormon because I felt ashamed. I was like, I know what people think when they hear Mormon. I know what people see, and I don't want to be associated with that. So I was working really hard to make sure nobody knew. I was not letting any Mormon anything slip out. And I was like, okay, Jennifer, this is a sign. If you don't want anybody to know you're Mormon, maybe you shouldn't be anymore. It's time to go. And so I got through my first semester and we were going to cut ties entirely. And the ward that we were in, there was one couple there who had come from the Bay Area and they were really struggling with a lot of the same things we were. And we were friends with them. And they let us know that he was being called as the new bishop. And they're like, if you still want to leave, that's fine. But we would really love your help if you stayed. And so we're like, well, we can try to stay and keep going, try to help you kind of make things a little better in this one little pocket of Mormonism. And I was still choir director. It was coming up on Easter. And there were two wards that shared the same building. And the other ward that shared the building with our ward did not want to allow our choir to practice at all in any of the rooms of the building. They thought we were getting in their way. And I'm like, you guys start church an hour after we're over. We're not in your way. Why do you? And so they were making a big deal about it and they were calling our new bishop about it. And it was this whole thing. And it hit me. It doesn't matter what I do. This is what Mormonism is. It doesn't matter how hard I work. I will never make any pocket of Mormonism better. And it won't go beyond maybe a couple people around me. I can't change this. It's everywhere. It's coming from the very top and it's in every level of the organization, this bullying and this meanness and judgment and shame. And I was like, this is dumb. I can't fix it. And so we let our bishop know, we're like, you know what? We love you guys. And more power to you for wanting to try and stay and change church culture one little piece at a time. We're not doing that anymore. We're done. And Easter Sunday, I was like, don't worry. I won't just leave the choir just dropped with nobody to direct for Easter Sunday. I'll make sure I get us through that. And then we're out. And so Easter Sunday of 2023, that was the last time we ever went to the LDS church. And we were so glad. We've been so happy. Never going back.
So did you, during this time, you had said that at a point you were going to Sacramento congregation part of the time, alternating Sundays. Were you still alternating during that time where you were trying to support the new bishop?
We were still alternating. And so I had made it so that our choir practices were only every other week. Because I was like, I'm not going to be there on every other week because I'm going to be this other place where my kids are safe. So yeah, we were still alternating every other week. And then we just said goodbye and never looked back.
Did they know that you were attending, that your every other was attending Community of Christ?
Yes, they did know that. Yeah. And they were totally supportive of it. They were really great. They're like, we understand. A lot of Mormons who kind of lean on the more nuanced side, is what they like to call it, are much more understanding and supportive of people who are like, I don't know if this is for me. And so it felt really good to know that we didn't have to stop being friends with the few people we made friends with just because we were like, yeah, we can't do this anymore. And so, yeah, we still remained friends with them until they moved back to the Bay Area. And that was only a year ago, maybe. So yeah, they're still really good people, and more power to them for wanting to keep trying. I didn't want to anymore. I was done. I've been bullied in this space my whole life. I don't need to keep being bullied in this space. I'm out. And I had friends at school and we had so much love and friendship at Community of Christ that I was like, this is fine. It's fine. We can leave. And my parents were surprisingly good about it. Like, my mom had seen me kind of pulling away. And she listened to, like, she followed an LDS therapist, Dr. Julie Hanks, on like Facebook or whatever. And something that Dr. Julie Hanks talked a lot about was about handling, like, when your kids don't believe the same way you do, and when people you love leave the church. And so she had kind of taken a lot of that in. So she was largely really good about not saying nasty, awful things and not making it so that we had to pull really far away, which was a pleasant surprise. So we didn't end up losing our family like we were afraid we would. And Jeff's family was really good about it too, because his sister she'd kind of pioneered it for us, because Jeff and his twin sister actually both in 2020, both of them decided we're done. Separately, they didn't even talk to each other. They didn't know the other person was going through that, but at the same time, it was like within the same few weeks, they both made the same decision, which is wild. So she had kind of gone through it with the family and trained the family how not to behave. And so when we made it clear that we were going, they'd already had a couple of years to practice. So they've been really good about all of it. We don't talk to them about our real reasons, and we've allowed them to believe that it is 100% because of our kids' status as LGBTQ individuals and their safety in the church. We just let them kind of believe what they want to. They haven't asked, and so we don't feel the need to bring it up and go into super detailed explanations, because they wouldn't want to hear what we have to say anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we just kind of we kind of stay off of the topic of religion with our families, and it works. We're fine, and we can get along with them and spend time with them, and all that stuff's been mostly fine. So
the journey is just unbelievable. And the amount of trauma and guilt and emotions that you held on to for so long. Part of me is just amazed that you are connected with any church. I mean, that didn't just completely destroy any desire even for faith community. So kudos to you I can't imagine carrying that weight for so long. And, I just thinking now of when you express that emotion of, wait a minute, you can't make this trip before me.
Right. Right.
I'm the one who's been staying at home being the good Mormon wife and keeping this all together. Yeah. So, wow. What a journey. This is a little bit off topic, but I'm just interested because of what you shared in the beginning of your story and with your aunt. Are your parents able to have a relationship with your children?
They've been really good about it. They don't understand, but they have been really good about not saying things that will hurt my kids. My mom has been, I have no idea what she's really thinking internally, but as long as she doesn't say it out loud, she loves my kids. And whatever other flaws she has, she loves my children. And she loves her own children too. Like, she loves me. I know she does. And she wants to maintain connection with us. And whatever she may be thinking about rightness or wrongness or whatever, she keeps it to herself. She doesn't say anything to my kids. She just fully accepts them as they are. Occasionally she'll say things to my hearing that I have to be like, Mom, what do you mean by that, Mom? And then she just very quickly is like, oh, well, but she's really careful about she doesn't express those things in front of my children, and I don't repeat them. So she's able to kind of have a good relationship with them and still be a good grandma. And my grandfather, who had left the church when she was like 12, he's still alive. He's like 93 now. For his 90th birthday, we went down to Livermore to have a big family dinner. And when my parents left to go home, we kind of stayed behind, and we let my grandpa and my two aunts there know that we had left the church. They didn't know because my mom didn't tell them, I'm sure, from her own levels of shame about it. And they were so excited for us. And my grandfather, actually, he had trove of research that he had done when he had done his own faith crisis. And he had backed the Tanners and a lot of their research into Joseph Smith and historical stuff. And he had every single print copy of I can't remember the title of it, but it's the magazine of Mormon thought. Like he's got every single print edition of this magazine he has from all these scholars across Mormonism and falling in all kinds of different places on the Mormonism spectrum and all kinds of stuff. He had an 1835, I think it's 1835 copy of the Book of Mormon with a Library of Congress stamp in it. He had this old book that was published in the late 1700s and some guy talking about his experience with angels, and he knew all the angels and how all the angels of heaven worked and stuff. And it's full of my grandpa's like underlines and notes and Joseph Smith plagiarized kind of questions in the margins. It's fascinating. And he bequeathed it to us. He's like, I don't want to give this stuff to like my local library because I know that Mormon missionaries go in there and find the anti-Mormon literature and check it out and never return. And so he gave it all to us. It's sitting in our living room. And I found among his books, several books about how to help your family escape a cult. And I was like, he's been wanting to help us get out all this time and I never knew. And it's just been wild. We were kind of kept at a distance from that family. And so I had to go through a grieving process of all the relationships that could have been if my mom hadn't been so, oh, they left, they're bad, you can't trust them, they're going to lie to you and tell you the church is bad. And then try to develop relationships with my aunts and uncles and cousins now, after all these years. Yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey to kind of go through all that and see a lot of the things that my grandpa thought about. There's so much more about my mom and how she interpreted her growing up, things that she said that suddenly got rewritten in my brain. Like, oh, you completely misinterpreted that situation. I understand that situation now because I've lived it. But you as a child were interpreting that all the wrong way. So like all kinds of things like that, where I just had to kind of rewrite like the stories that I knew about my own family. And it's been really cool to talk to my Aunt Kirsten again and to hear from her. Like she's formed some really cool relationships with my kids. And it's just been really, really cool to kind of see that open up in ways that I didn't know we were missing out on. That's been really cool.
Yeah, I bet that's some great connections and opportunities to reconnect with that you've been separated from.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've talked about the journey and included the transition to Community of Christ and how that took place. I just kind of sense that finding a faith community where you feel at home that is not a disconnect has got to be just absolutely freeing.
Yeah, it really is freeing. It's been so cool to see how Community of Christ does things and how they approach things and the kinds of really much healthier relationships among congregants and members, and to see how that translates through multiple generations. You know, the people who have kids the same age as my kids, having grown up with more these healthier ideas because their parents had these healthier ideas to lean on. That's been a really cool experience to get to see an example of what it could be. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad that that has been your experience. I mean, I think certainly, and I may get criticized for saying this, but, you know, Community of Christ has not always been where we are. And we're not there in every place.
Right.
So I'm really pleased that that got to be your experience. And I think that we're certainly moving in that direction. And there's more and more of that. You know, I'm not so naive as to say, well, we're there. I think one of the things that excites me about Community of Christ and always has, and I'm born and raised in the church, is that we're on a journey and that we're continuing the journey. And I think anytime we stop, then that's not going to be, it'll hold a different place for me because I appreciate that we're journeying. Some days I wish we could journey a little faster. But I come from a pretty traditional area of the church. So kind of have that spectrum of life in the church. So it's a blessing and a curse.
Right.
So I am always pleased to hear when someone has come into a place in the church where they do find that welcome and home and safety. I think that's what we're trying to do. So really, really good to hear. I'm interested to know, Jennifer, what are your hopes for Community of Christ? You're fairly new, I mean, within 5 years. And as you see, you have this significantly different experience in a faith tradition. Now you've been in the midst of this. What would you say are your hopes for Community of Christ?
I really connect with what you said about being on a journey. I really hope that Community of Christ continues the journey that they have been on. I also am not naive enough to say anywhere is perfect. There's always growth. There's always things that need fixing. And I don't know Community of Christ well enough to know all of its little quirks in need of improvement. But I do see that people are really committed to continuing to try, continuing to allow for lots and lots of differences of opinion and lots of different levels of belief. And my hope for them is that they continue that. And that by doing so, it will attract people who are looking for a spiritual home. And that, we see a lot of faith communities shrinking. And my hope for Community of Christ is that as they continue to grow and change and apologize for past mistakes and adjust, that they will be recognized for the good that they are, and that people will want to help in the work that they're doing and will feel welcome and wanted and feel like they can be a part of our community, even if it's just twice a year, whatever, that they can feel like they can be a part of us no matter where they've come from, no matter what level of participation they want to engage in. Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like or you feel that you need the Community of Christ to hear you say, whether that's the leadership or the church? What do you need Community of Christ to hear you say?
Really just thank you. Thank you for loving us, for accepting us, for letting us come and chill and not expecting us to hold to some kind of creed, allowing us to explore what our spirituality dictates, allowing us to just to be and giving us the opportunity to participate and feel love without any kind of pressure. Like I'm so grateful for that. And even though as my spirituality has changed and shifted and I kind of lean much more agnostic atheist at this point, I'm so appreciative that that's something I can be honest about. And nobody looks sideways at me. And nobody says I'm wrong. And nobody insists that I have to believe in God. They just love me and love my children and love our family and want us to be in community with them. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for it.
That is another thing that for me is very encouraging to hear. I am so thankful that has been your experience. I know that would be my hope for you and for anyone seeking a faith community and a sacred, safe space. And so that's great. And boy, that's going easy on Community of Christ to just say thank you. No demands, just thank you and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you haven't been able to say? Or, I mean, I haven't asked a lot of questions because I've just been fascinated in listening to your story. But anything else that you'd want to add before we close up?
No, I don't think so. I think I've covered it pretty well.
Well, I want to thank you again for the honesty, even in this last answer, your honesty. And I'm glad again that the space has been created for you to be that way and to be able to share in that way. I know that this is a vulnerable story to tell, but I so appreciate you being willing to take the time to share it with me and with our listeners. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And I want to give a special thanks, as always, to our listeners. You have been listening to Fair Trade in the Faith Unfiltered series. We, too, are hoping to move onward and create a new and sacred space for you, our listeners, and for those who haven't yet had a chance to join us. If you want to hear more from courageous people willing to share the candid stories of their faith journey and what brought them to Community of Christ, check out our Fair Trade series at faithunfilteredpodcast.org. Again, thank you for being with us. I am your host, Blake Smith, and you've been listening to Faith Unfiltered Podcast. And as my colleague and fellow host, says, and I'm just going to borrow her words in this, go out and make the world a better place. Have a great day.